help you gain more understanding about the measures of academic progress, our math assessment. My name is Monica Gipu. I am the ELC and ES curriculum director, and alongside with me I have Rochelle Savoie. She's our middle school teaching and learning coordinator, and you know Mr. Jim Che, our elementary principal. So I'll start the first part of the presentation just to give an overview of what math is, and then my colleagues will get into more deeply talking about what we teach here and how we do on the test and so on. So, but as we always start, we want to draw our attention to our core values, our attributes, our mission, and for today's talk, I want us to highlight excellence because this is something that we always strive for, and also the attribute of self-aware, because this is something that we hope our kids become, and we want them to gain more self-awareness through everything that we do here. And the math test is one little thing that helps them get to know themselves better. So our focus today is to provide an overview of what this assessment is in general terms. We are not here to talk about individual results. I'm sure you might have questions about your child's test and their scores, but having a conversation with their teacher is the best way to get answers to those questions, because your child's teacher knows them best and they can answer whatever questions you have. So today we're just giving a broad overview of what the assessment actually is. So at ASD, we do the math assessment from grades 3 through 8. We don't test younger kids, and so far we don't test high school students on the math. And we have 2 sessions, one in the fall and then one in the spring, to measure growth. We assess 3 different subjects, math, reading, and science, on each of these sessions, in the fall and in the spring. And as far as time, we always get this question if it's a timed test or not. It's not really a timed test, but we encourage students to go through the questions because the system itself picks on times when students rush through the questions and also when there's inactivity. So we want the kids to keep a good pace as they go through the questions, not to drag too much and not to rush through it either. And then we use this to get a more complete picture of our students' learning, both in their growth, because the test focuses a lot on growth and growth projection, and also on achievement. Math is a test that's widely used both in the US and internationally. As you can see, a large number of students in the US schools, public schools, are using the math test and that information provided by the test. And as far as international schools worldwide, 85% of the US State Department schools are using the math test. And here locally, KHDA mandates that all US curriculum schools use the math assessment. So we are in a large pool of schools, both nationally and internationally, that use this reputable assessment. When we talk about math, it's very important that we understand something that's very critical about an assessment that takes place on a specific day. Imagine you're a grade 3 student, and on the day before the math test, you had a very big fight with your best friend. And because of that, you didn't sleep very well. And because of that, you woke up very late, and your mom rushed you out of the house. And then you get to school, and you're like, you have nap first thing in the morning. Maybe you'll be able to put yourself together and do really well, but maybe you also struggle a little bit with this because of all the personal things that go in your little life at that age. So the math test is a snapshot. It's like one picture in a photo album. It could make you look great, or you could look a little like, maybe it's not my best day. Maybe this is not my best photo. It's very different from a painting in a museum where an artist took a long time to paint a real picture of something in a realistic way. In my mind, when I think about a painting, I think about the understanding that our teachers get of the student every single day, getting to work with the child, getting to see them on their good days and on their not so good days, getting to talk to them, getting to talk to you about your child. So that's a more complete picture of who the child is. The map assessment is valuable because it provides valuable data, but it's a snapshot. It's one picture. It could be an amazing picture, or it could be a picture that you don't want to see again until you take a better one next year. So that's something that we want to keep in mind. It's not really the all and all of what a student can do because it's a snapshot taken on a certain day. And this is an example of a little puppy. This puppy doesn't look like this every single day, right? This is not an accurate image of who this little puppy is. He could run, he could jump, he could play. Now he's sleeping, and that's when this picture was taken. It's a snapshot of it. So the way map gives information about student progress and growth is by using a scale. And when we look at this picture, I want us to notice some things. This looks like a ladder, right? And the interval between the different steps on the ladder is equal. That's very typical to map as well. They measure, the scale that's used to measure map is an equal scale that doesn't change whether your child is in grade 3 or your child is in grade 8. And we'll talk more about it a little later. But if you look at this picture, this boy here, he started lower than the girl, right? And at the top here, he's still a little lower than the girl. But look at his growth compared to her growth. He started lower, and he's reaching closer to where the girl is now. She also made progress, but his growth is a little bigger than hers. So that's what we're interested in seeing when we talk about math. How is the child actually growing? And it's an individual journey. It's an individual growth, growth journey for each child, because they may start low, but then 1 year they have this growth spurt like they do in real life. And then their growth is bigger than somebody who may have started higher on the scale. So this is something that we're very interested in seeing, how kids actually grow through the years and from one testing session to another. Now also is an adaptive test, which means that kids don't always get the same questions. You have kids who sit next to each other who will not see the same question on their screen at any time during the test. The way the test works, kids start with a question, and then they might get a right answer to this question, and then the next question is a harder one. They might get that one right too, but then the next one is an even harder one, and then they will get that one wrong, most likely, and then they're going to get an easier one, and then they're going to get that one right, and then they're going to get a harder one. So through the 48 to 52 questions of the test, they will get harder and easier questions until they get about 50% of them right. And this establishes where they are at that point, based on this too hard, too easy, just right, too hard, too easy, just right. So this is how the system figures out where exactly the child is at that given moment. This is something that sometimes is frustrating for little kids, and we were just talking before we started presenting. Especially for very young kids, like grade 3 students who have never taken this assessment before, to get very difficult questions and see them and know that they are expected to get them right could be very frustrating. So that's why we always say to them, this is normal, it's okay. You're not supposed to answer all of the questions correctly. Some of these are for big kids. Some of these are much harder than what you can do right now. So do your best, but move on. Do your best, but move on. Because these, you're not meant to get everything right. It's impossible to get all the questions on this assessment right. So this is something that we try to coach our students, and we try to tell them on and on, expect something to be hard. Do your best, try your best, but if it's impossible, do something and then move on. Don't get stuck on something that seems really, really hard. So the typical classroom distribution that we see on the map, measured by the RIT scale, the Rasch unit scale, and as I said before, it's an equal interval scale. It's very similar to the meter that we use to measure height. And this is the framework that we use, that MAP uses to measure student growth. It's got spans of 10 points, and it can go either way, up or down. Typically, when we talk about the RIT scale, we compare it to the growth chart that you have seen most likely with little kids. And as you know, when the child is very, very young, their growth is very abrupt sometimes. They just grow really fast. But then as they grow older, their growth comes a little bit flatter. That doesn't mean that they don't grow, but they grow in a less impressive way, if I can say that, because there's less opportunity to grow once you reach the high level in your performance. So this is a growth chart for girls between 2 to 20 years in height, right? How we expect kids to grow. So if you see at the beginning when the child is very young, we see kids, they're growing from 1 month to another. They're getting higher, they're getting stronger, they're getting taller. But once they reach 15, 16, 17, their height kind of stabilizes. They may still grow a little bit up to 19, 20 years, but not as much as they did in their first years of life. And this is similar to how kids grow on the MAP score as well, because there's more opportunities to grow when you're younger and you have more to learn than when you reach the higher levels of your learning. There's some important terminology that we want to discuss when we talk about MAP. You will hear the word norms, and these are usually they're published by MAP based on the schools in the US and how the kids in similar grade levels to the kids here did in all the schools in the US. So we use norms if you want to ask the question, how does my child compare to others on the reading. The norm in the US is this. So this is how your child compares to this norm at this point. Then we talk, yes?
Sorry, quick question. So for the norms, like on the reporting that families receive, that norm is compared, the number is for all of US
The norm
testing.
comes from the US.
Is there any number for ASD specifically, so we can see how they do it at the grade level?
later.
I'll talk about it.
Yeah, yes, we'll talk about that later. So generally from MAP, as a general term, norms refers to the US
Okay.
schools.
Thank you.
Then we talk about proficiency. This is Common Core based. This is compared to criteria, taken directly from the Common Core standards that we also use. And this answers the question specifically, what does my child know about this or that? What's my child proficiency about a certain topic or a certain content? Growth is what I described before, how a child moves from one testing session to another. And usually on the report is an estimate. Based on your child's performance on a certain assessment, the test estimates that they would grow this much. Now this is an estimate, and it's very possible that your child will reach that or not, because the test only knows what the child did on that day. They don't know the child as a whole, as we said at the beginning. So that's something to keep in mind. That's something that we work towards, but it's not the end of the world if a child doesn't reach that estimate growth, because again, it's an estimation and it's based on a snapshot assessment. And then you will see the term percentile, which is different from percentage, because it's not what percentage of whatever my child reached. It's how will a student perform compared to others in that same group. So if your child is in a 75 percentile, for example, this means that he or she scored better than 75% of the students in that group. And I think this is my part, right? Yeah. So Rachel will talk
just for a couple of slides. So just as though Monica mentioned that the map is a snapshot of what the student was able to do on that day, and without really understanding the context of how that student showed up that day, the map also is just a snapshot of what we teach and value at ASD. So generally in the three areas that the map tests, language arts, mathematics, and science, map really only tests these things, right? It's a one reading test. Doesn't show what we teach in terms of language, speaking and listening, writing. In terms of mathematics, it's really just the concepts and procedures. There's so much more into our math teaching program in terms of communicating and modeling and seeing structure and making generalizations. And same with science, right? It's really only measuring core concepts, the content, not the science and engineering practices that we value in our program. So that's important to highlight. Again, continuing with this theme of mapping a snapshot, right? When we look at triangulating and looking at one piece of data point, map is 2 times a year, right? And we'll talk kind of at the end about how we use map as teachers or as divisions, but that's 2 times a year. We see students, right? Students are in front of students 7 hours a day, approximately 182 days per year. There's a lot more that we can understand from our students that we see on a day-to-day basis from our observations. And again, on that previous slide, we talked about kind of the content that we teach, but we also value our learner development and our social work habits, our dispositions of our students, right? Our attributes our core values. There's so much more to our students than just this snapshot or what we value and teach at ASD. All right.
Okay. Yeah. So I can
That's all I
talk a
have.
little bit more about the results that you would have received. Okay. So the question is always, how do we do? And what we can share is in terms of how we did as a grade level, right, in terms of the means. So on the right of each side is the US national norms. They have just published for this year new norms. It usually happens about every 5 years that they publish norms. So we received that, and it's interesting, the articles that have come up, and worldwide, math scores actually have gone down. And we can kind of understand that in terms of the group that they generally took, largely from COVID. We see some of that, but also worldwide, that's similar. So it's actually interesting that the US national norms have gone down. The next region over is NISA, so that's the schools in this region, everywhere from Abu Dhabi, Mumbai, and so on. That's, I guess, our peer schools, for lack of a better word. And they're usually more competitive than the US national norms, usually. But you can see there's a couple of cases that's not. And then ASD is on the left. So we have data from last year, right, we're taking the test. We have data from the spring as well. So as you can see, in most cases, from 3 to 8, we compare quite favorably.
James, can I quickly ask, do the scores also compare to each other, like by grade? Like, is grade 3 underperforming compared to grade 4?
It's hard to say underperforming because I guess they have a lower score. So in terms of their RIT score, as I think it was Monica mentioned, it points to a place on this scale, right? So the average score of all our third graders who took the test last year, it's about 193.7. So same thing when you think of school-wide in grade 4, the average score was 205. So yes, it is different. I don't know if it's underperforming because that suggests that they actually should perform in that, and that's not
We're
true.
expecting grade 3 to score a little less than grade 4 because
Right.
they
As you go ahead,
You're
right?
expecting it to ascend as
Yes,
to show
absolutely.
this kind of growth from one year to another.
Correct. So you would expect, right, an 8th grader to perform probably better because
Yes.
actually it's possible you get the same questions,
Yeah.
right, in the whole bank. So if you were a 7th grader and you received 200 and you're a 3rd grader and you got 200, it actually points to the same place on the whole scale.
As
That
in the
makes sense?
7th and 8th grader got the same questions?
It's possible. So there's a massive, right, a question bank, and it's possible that all of us in the room would get similar questions based on how we answer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if a 3rd grader did really, really well and kept answering, you get some really, really hard questions. Right, and we've seen them actually. It's interesting, one year that I took the test, yeah, it gets into, high school math, it gets really deep. I think I stopped, I don't want to see my score.
But
So,
it's very too relative to your grade level, because you were mentioning, like, if you have a hard question, work through it.
so that's one thing we talked about years ago, because especially I think at my previous school, we even tried it in grade 2 for 1 year, and we just stopped. One, because the kids were just tapping really quickly, right, on iPads, you can imagine. And also, we actually talked to the math people about this. We actually asked if they could start a question a little bit lower, or for lack of a better word, you want the confidence. And it was really discouraging for us and the child. I remember standing behind someone, and the first 3 questions were like really hard. So of course, you're already like, why would you do that? Don't ask a grade 4 question. There's no such thing as a grade 4 question. But does that make sense? If you're going first time, we don't teach the test. We never do multiple choice, right? We don't time. I know it's not time, but I think kids feel the time, right, when people are finishing. And the first 3 questions are so hard, you can imagine what happens. So we stopped in grade 2, and even grade 3 the first time, we asked our teachers, please walk around, right? Please encourage. We noticed some kids who spend way too much on a question, is sometimes who maybe couldn't get it, but also our top students, they just want to get the question right. And it's like, no, 15 minutes on one question, you're never going to finish. So also, it's interesting to ask your teacher, how long did your child take? All the minutes are there. We know about rapid guessing, and we know about, wow, if it's 240 minutes for a 50-minute test, then sometimes we just say stop, it's not healthy, and the results aren't going to be valid. Okay?
So this one was just published for 2024.
No, so that is the old norms based on 2020. So I'll show you in the next slide because they just published them this summer, right, as a comparison group. So that's why next year, if you came to this presentation, for the next 5 years, you'll see similar numbers for the US because they only publish norms every 5 years, right? So this is based on the old norms, right? So this summer, we received it, they published it in July, which you'll see in the
These
second.
ones are every year, also every 5 years.
I'm sorry?
Every year.
Every year.
Based on the scores that the
Every
students
year.
are
Yeah, this is every year, because they just take, once they close the window, we can't do it right now because the window's not closed. Some schools are still testing, so we can't get that, but I'll show you some information to do
What
with
do you mean the
that.
schools are not necessarily, we got 2 bars, right? The second bar in our report was, I'm assuming, the US one.
Yes.
Yes.
So like in the map, like one that I received, the US norm was 185.
Yes, so this will be, but we won't always know this right
So
away.
you're waiting for this one, but the
Yes.
one on the right-hand side is
That's
already
published.
published.
Yes, that's published.
Okay.
And that'll be the same, we already know what the spring's gonna be the same. Right, that, because that's set for 5 years, they won't change that. All right, so here's the reading scores. I'll give you a moment to take a look at it. And what you'll notice is similar to what I think it was Michelle or Monica shared. You might see, right, bigger growth, and then you can see kind of it slows down a little bit, and that's true worldwide in most cases. Is it okay to move on? And you can see similar to science.
Can I ask another question?
Of course.
Is the question bank always the same, you said? So they would be getting the same questions in the fall map as they would in the spring?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. That's a very tightly held secret. We don't know.
Okay.
All right, well, which I'll get to.
There are so many questions in the map that it's statistically unlikely that they will have many of the same questions remaining. I have rarely heard a child say, oh, I got this question before in October when they're testing in May.
But theoretically,
But they could.
right, but are they assuming you learn more curriculum, so they're asking more questions relevant to what you learned from fall to spring?
It's just whatever you get. It depends on, yeah, exactly how you answer, because that determines the next question that the system assigns to you.
Can I, sorry, I just want to add one other thing, because the questions are all based on Common Core standards, and it's standards that we use. But every school has a different scope and sequence of when they may address those standards. So it is, a group of questions, but what our students are learning right now, I can speak from a middle school perspective, right? The unit that students learn in math right now, they were very successful with the math because it's fresh, right? But that might be an area, because there's different areas in math business, that next, in the spring, they might forget that, but then they're getting geometry questions correct, as opposed to the algebra ones that they've just done the unit. So they're all based on the grade level Common Core standards. But again, every school develops their curriculum in a different progression, so it's hard to.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, we standards when we're designing our learning is here's the standards that you need to address, let's say in grade 3, but when we choose to address those standards might be different times or that content area.
Okay.
We make sure that we address all the standards, but some might be addressed in October, some might be addressed in April, throughout the year. Can't address all of them.
Let's hope they continue to gain more mastery in them.
Yeah, can I add 2 things to that? So one, for instance, we have kind of 2 big science units a year. So it's possible that when we did the map, one grade didn't do that science time yet.
That's what I heard.
So that's possible, yes.
Yeah, I know this,
Yes, so that is possible. And the other interesting thing is, this was about, I'm gonna say maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And I remember I had probably the most brilliant student I've ever worked with. And he scored, theoretically, they say the maximum is 350. I don't think I've ever seen it. The highest I've seen is a 310 for math, and that's very, very high. So it's interesting that in the spring, he actually got a lower score. So they were like, what's going on with that? When we called math at the time, that was again 15 years ago, we dug and dug and dug, and it's really interesting that it was actually a math problem, that they actually ran out of questions, that they did not. So what they did was, as you can imagine, the computer keeps going up and down. So if you run out of the top, say, 3 questions, you can ask a lower question, because he answered that right, it just pointed towards that. Without thinking, he just pointed to that. So in other words, we broke the system at that point. So again, that was 15 years ago. I've never seen anything like that. So in most cases, you shouldn't be able to top out. In math, if you got all 52 questions right, I don't know what would happen. That'd be really interesting to see. Maybe you would get a 350, I don't know. Again, 310 is the highest I've seen for a 4th grade student or a question?
So my understanding is that the level of difficulty doesn't really change from fall to spring. It's the the question bank is staying the same, that's what you're
I
trying
think
to say?
it's largely
It's
there.
just that the kids have learned more material.
Correct, so
There
you're gonna
is
get
a
another
format.
question right. You would theoretically, right, over time, you would hope you get more of the questions
Right,
right.
exactly.
So then the questions that someone here is receiving obviously is much harder than
Right,
someone.
right.
Yes, so that's my understanding.
Sounds-
Massive question bank,
Yeah.
right, and you would just answer the ones that you can. And it would
So
just-
you guys are not tweaking the
We
difficulty level?
we can't touch it. No, we never see it. Yeah.
So this talk just happens to be behind when you just share the results with us.
Yes.
In a typical year, where we don't have a Tuesday talk, how do we find the ASD information?
I think we do this talk every year.
We do it every year, we share the
Right
numbers.
after
I mean,
that?
I don't know if you-
Usually.
Yes, because
so-
parents, yeah, usually we want the results and then we kind of explain, so.
Okay, so we don't have to chase you twice a year to figure out where the
No.
classroom performance is, the class grading. Okay.
Right.
So do you do another one in the
We don't do
spring
it in
then?
spring.
We don't, but I mean, if that's something that, again, most don't, but if you want that information in terms of how we do, sometimes it's late and we don't get it, but actually, we should be in time, we can talk about it if we want.
May, early May.
We can actually communicate that, and maybe we put it in with the results as well.
Because I asked this question in my parent-teacher preference last week when the math
Yes.
results were already done.
Yes.
And she didn't have the data for it. So
No.
she said,
That's one thing, because if the testing window is not closed yet in NISA, we don't have that.
Some of the information is not there.
The ASD, we will have it as the testing window closes 24 hours later, but the NISA we wouldn't have.
okay, so I don't know about the other parents. Specifically for me, I'm more interested in how my kid is performing at ASD. I mean, the general trend is we're outperforming the US like average, and the NISA we're slightly overperforming. But like for me, relevantly, like in my grade, is my kid for the same amount of resources that every child is getting, like are they at where they should be, et cetera. So
Yeah.
I found that the ASD one is more relevant for me.
Yes, I was gonna talk about this later, but I think, can you remind me, I want to get to that, I want to get through a few things, and then I'll talk about that. So, so what I did was we just put together, right, last year and this year, just with ASD, right, comparison as a whole group, right, as a grade level, how did we do compared to last year? As you can see, in many places, right, that grade level went up, right, but in some cases it did go down, and then by grade 8, it's actually very similar. In grade 8's the last year, as Monica mentioned, and in grade 9 they start doing things like SSATs and other
PSA.
PSATs. That's it. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, I'm in grade 3, so it's my first time, but as they go up before, like through grade 8, are there any other standardized tests like this for
There are
academic?
no. There are not. This is the only, I guess we call it external test.
Okay.
Yeah. Cat 4 in grades 3 and 5, and I think that would have come up. But
This
that's
type of
more
like
ability,
actual-
this type of,
Yeah.
it's more achievement test versus, it's a cognitive
Yeah.
test, a little bit different. Yes.
And for like grade 6, for example, the cohort for grade 6 questions would be against grade 7 and grade 8 only.
Sorry, what do you
In
mean
the
by that?
cohort of the group of questions, are they just against grade 7 and grade 8 as well, or does it go higher?
No, I mean, again, think of, I'll make it up, think of 100,000 questions. The questions range from very, very easy to high level, maybe AP calculus type. Everyone has access to the same, so you're not changing, right? It's just whichever questions that you answer right, you get a harder one until you tap out or get to those ones.
But what level of grade are those questions?
There is no, well, I guess it points to, MAP has kind of measured roughly what grade they are, and once upon a time, I remember talking about that in terms of what is a 217, right? 217 is maybe more students in grade 6 are getting, it was really hard to determine a grade level, there wasn't anything. Just because it's 194, right? What we can say is for ASD, the students in grade 3, their average was 194. Now, does it point to actually grade 2 work or grade 4 work? It's really hard to say. Because I'll tell you why when we look at what's underneath this. Then I'll get that. Okay, so I want to talk about the reports that you might be receiving. Okay, so is this the right one? I know we've shared different reports, and that's something we can get feedback in terms of what's most useful. So let's break down to each part. So the blue is the student performance. All right, so spring. This is a school that does more, right? They do a summer as well and fall and so on. Let's see, what else? So you have the U.S. grade level mean. So this person compared to the U.S. This child is doing, right, less than, or is not achieving the same level. And then a projection. A projection is an interesting number. My understanding is, for instance, if you're a grade 3 student taking the test with this many weeks of instruction, they look at the same child, right, at a different point in view, and they look at last year. All the kids who took who were grade 3 who took the test at the same time. They take all the numbers, they see all their growth, and they divide it by the number of kids. So you can imagine 50%, that means they expect, right? Last year, 50% of the kids made this amount of growth. So you know 50%, that means half the kids will underperform that, and half the kids would do better than that. So again, it's a projection based on numbers from the previous year. Okay? So that's part of the information you'll be getting. The other part is exactly what I was saying. You have the growth projection. So you have, right, all the years that your child has taken math, right? Here's the RIT score. And again, this is what I mean by growth projection. So in that year, they, according to math, right, 1 year ago, the average child grew 14 points. This child grew 18 points, right? And then another year, right, it was 10, but they actually grew 7, right, 7, 15. They were expected to grow 9 points, and actually they went down 1, which is possible, right? And then 6, and this child grew 19. So that's what those numbers mean. And here is the percentile range that we were talking about earlier. So at one point, this child performed, right, the same or better than 18% of US national norm students. Okay, and each of those numbers tell you how they did compare. If they were to stand in a line from 1 to 100, this is where they would be, and you scored better than this amount, and I guess less than the kids in front of you. Does that make sense for percentile? So those are the different pieces that you would receive. All right, I think you received family report as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, so we'll go over that a little bit. Okay. All right, family report, right, with a particular child, right? So they receive this score. Again, you have the US national average, and this is how Christopher did. What else? So you get 2 pieces of information. One, in terms of how they achieved. So again, compared to US national norms, at this point, they're 50% up, right, in terms of how they achieved. The second one is the growth. So when they measure, in this case, from fall to fall, that means this child did amazing growth compared to the US national norm, because you would expect they would get 50%. So this person grew, right, 96th percentile. They grew more than, the same as or more than 96% of the kids who took this test. So that's exceptional growth.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
This may be a really dumb question. What's the difference? You see that average achievement 47 percentile,
Yes.
and then the hybrid 96 percentile. So I understand the 96 percentiles that they've grown,
Mm-hmm.
like 96 percent
Yes.
compared to others. But what is that 47 percentile?
So that's the achievement. So in terms of, let's take it, for instance, if I was 5, I have no idea. If I am an adult and I'm 4'7", I'm probably lower percentile, right? That means there's a lot, there's not many adult males who are shorter than me, but there's a lot, right? And next year I grow to 6'7". That is exceptional growth, and maybe I am now, I don't know.
So the starting base was lower.
Correct.
The starting base was lower.
Correct. So
his
even though I'm
growth
not
was
cheating.
high, but he didn't surpass, like it wasn't that his,
Correct.
like, compared to everyone else, they maybe were a bit higher. So like whatever, he was maybe a D student and grew to an A student, whereas someone who was a B student grew to an A student, the growth would be as big, but the percentile in terms of where they're at is lower, standard.
So I still get the growth, but I still don't get the achievement.
Like the growth only looks high because they started on a lower base.
Right.
But his achievement is within 50th percentile or 46th percentile.
Like he's performing 47% better
Yeah.
than the actual score.
Exactly.
In that.
So the growth, so my daughter's in 3rd grade, so we didn't see the growth.
Correct, yes, you don't have anything to measure yet.
That means next year.
Spring.
Spring you will
that is
see,
well,
correct,
okay.
correct.
So you guys are gonna keep track of everything, like every year how they performed?
Yeah, so similar to this page, right, you will, if you have this, right, you'll see, right, you'll have this. So that means every year that your child has taken the math test, you'll see all, right, you'll see this in terms of the growth and the actual growth, yes.
But if you were to assign value, the achievement number is more important than the growth number, right? Like if, let's say we're switching schools and someone wants to ask
Right.
us to see your math scores, they want to see the achievement. I understand growth is
Right.
great because you
Yes.
see how much
I
your
would
child is
say
improving,
yes,
but-
I would say yes.
Yeah.
But can I was gonna do this later, but maybe this is important now. So again, if you don't mind, I want to share my personal take, not only as an educator, but also as a parent. So I have 3 kids who have gone through and they've graduated from high school. They have never seen their math test. Because I pick it up, I look at it, and in 100% of the case, it's something I knew already. right? Either through how they do at school, how they don't read, even though, I bribed, I threatened, none of them are readers. Whatever I've done, I knew already, and I put it away, and I asked the teachers, and it's, right, I know they're not good readers. I know, 2 out of 3 are decent at math, 1 isn't. So again, I guess for me, the map serves a place because if you go to another school, it's the report card and it's the map that leads, right? Let's be honest, right? So you look at that. So I just had conversations with a parent who was really concerned because their child did not do well in the map test, and that's entirely possible. Because in my opinion, I don't think the map is an accurate reflection. It's what we have to do. It's a multiple choice test. It doesn't teach all those things. However, the reality is it goes somewhere else, right? So we have to do what we can do. As a 5th grade teacher many years ago, at one school they told us, you drop everything for 1 week and you teach how to take a multiple choice. And it was really hard for me. We do this and we drill and even that, it doesn't guarantee, but it helps, okay, how do you take a multiple choice or how do you, eliminate things? But it was so unlike what we do, right? Back to the other parent is, along with those reports, we usually fill out like a confidential reference form, and even we've actually talked to schools in terms of, because of course we want to help and we want to give a school what we think is a more accurate representation of your child. Please know we're all doing that. When I receive on the other end admissions files, yes, I look at map, but it doesn't tell the whole story because as a teacher, I know that it's more possible for a really high achieving student to bomb a map, right? You've seen that, right? For a host of reasons. It's really hard to guess your way up. It's almost impossible to get it, to just keep guessing until you get a really, really high score. The passages for reading get really long and complicated. I don't think it's possible to do that, right? So for me, again, I kind of put map in its place, and to me, right, talking to the teacher even at the end of the year. So I don't think you necessarily need to wait. Of course, you will see the map results and we can talk about this, but to me, keeping in touch with your teacher, talking about those things is so much more useful, valuable, and I'll tell you why. Because a part of it is what to do with this information, right? I think part of you want, and let me talk about that, and then I can answer some questions. So if I can kind of just go on. I can go through some of these. It's kind of the same example, but I want to get to one of the slides. So this is to me, this is the key. And this was the hardest part as a homework teacher, because at first, for many years, right, I wanted to do something with the information. And then as an administrator, we tried to do something with the information, but it was hard, and I'll tell you why. So this is a RIT range, right, from 201 to 210, right? And it's just a screenshot, and you can see this is for math. So you have the 4 strands in math. And then within this RIT range, they tie it to the Common Core State Standards, which this test is linked to. And then they'll tell you the standard. So this standard is add and subtract within 20, and it goes into a lot, okay? But what they told us afterwards is, first of all, this is really long. I'm sorry, this is just a screenshot, but this can be really long. You could have anywhere from 1 standard. Some RIT ranges have 0 standards, they're listed, and some have 20. And what RITs and what MAP says is your child is getting 50% of these questions right. From 191 to 200, they're getting 75% of these questions right. And the next one is 211 to 220. They're getting 25% of these questions right. But the problem is we don't know what questions. They will not tell us. And I guess, right, they also they want to protect their questions as well. You can imagine why, right? It'd be great for testing centers if they knew what questions they are. But if you're getting 50% of these right, and there are 30 standards, how do I know which ones they got? So it was so hard, and I think even to this day, we haven't figured out how do you help someone with these type of questions. So I think what we go back to, if we believe in our program, and of course our program we can always do better with reading, writing, math, and so on, right? If we trust that our programs are aligned with the standards that we teach, right? Then, right, theoretically, if we teach that well, your child's scores should go up by this measure. Does that make sense? Right? It's really hard to teach the test, right? Because you may know some of these types of questions. Again, they don't even give you what the question is. They just give you the standard. And as a teacher, we could probably make a question that would go to that. Add and subtract within 20. We do that quite a lot in the classroom. We use manipulatives, right? You act it out, you dance, you sing, you do things with it to show depth of understanding, communication, right? Perseverance, all those things. Math doesn't measure that. You'll get this, and then you get 4 answers. So you don't even get to watch a child go 4 + 6 and get it wrong and know where they got it wrong. You just get wrong. So it's very limited in terms of what we can actually do that actually makes a difference. So we know, right, reading with your child, right, developing his or her vocabulary and love of reading, right? Good math facts, right? Yes, that's very important. I think your homeroom teacher could have told you that without the map telling you that. So again, we know it's important. Again, it's a physical document that goes to another school. We get that along with the report card. But I think that's why we try to have this conversation, because we have some parents that are like, how do I get better at math? It's really hard to. I wish I would figure it out. I think we can all make a lot of money to do that, but again, it's good teaching, right? It's good practice, and it's at home.
Do you guys look at the buckets?
I'm
So
sorry?
like, when you look at reading, for instance, there were like 3 or 4.
Yes, so math, for instance, there's 4.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily have, I mean, we have that information. And again, it's one of those things, how much information? So part of what you're asking, I think, to go with the other questions is how much would we like to share? So teachers have this, and we'd rather have a conversation where we can talk about the scores in relation to how your child is doing. So again, we're not hiding, and maybe we'll get to one point where all the way through middle school, we share all this information. But I think
My
our
question
focus.
was more of like, so for instance, if you see like across the board in grade 3, for instance,
Yes.
you have a lot of kids struggling with vocabulary. Does that then influence how you're structuring the curriculum?
Yes, yes
The
and
next
no.
slide was, we were gonna highlight a couple things, I don't know if you
Yeah, sorry.
want me, that's okay, do you want me to?
Yeah, okay, before we get to that, can I just maybe, yes, and then, was there anything else in terms of the continuum and what? And
I'm just thinking in terms of just multiple choice and testing in general. There's always that need from the SATs. I mean, is there a way you can kind of, or someone could do extra work where they get used to testing? And even though they don't do it great, at least they don't get, overwhelmed
Yeah, no.
or stressed, like just the practice with that?
No, I hear what you're saying, and I guess I'm torn. When I taught 5th grade, we would do it probably the day before, just to do a little bit was better than none. I wonder about 3rd grade. I think teachers would talk about it, everything from, make sure you get a good night's sleep, have good breakfast, they're just doing the best, you're supposed to get it wrong. In terms of taking valuable class time to do that, I'll have to think about that, and maybe we will, right? I don't know if it's an either and, but again, for every instructional decision you make, right,
But even
it's
like
time,
on like
right?
weekly assessments,
Yeah, but
like just to
even-
throw in a couple of multiple choice.
Or
that
even
ways
just
to
like
do it.
even just like guides for parents to do extra work outside of school. Like, I know that there's some math testing for Academy,
Yeah.
and you can put in your scores and
Yeah.
really start practicing that,
Right.
but like other
Okay.
resources.
Again, can I give my philosophy? Yes, you can do that, and actually, I'll tell you the way to do that. Philosophically, I don't believe that's the best way to do it, right? If your child is struggling in fluency or automaticity, you would have known that. So yes, I sent my kids to Kumon for a little bit, right? That's what I believed in, right? Yes, and I can tell you all, and even on camera, if you go to Khan Academy and you get some of these numbers, you put it in, they will give you hundreds and thousands of questions. To me, that's not valuable for what we should be doing, and I don't want to assign that. I think we assign in every math unit, for instance, we should send out a parent letter which has some things that we believe is good, right, depth of understanding. If it's drills, I mean, you can find that out there. There's a lot on Common Core, you just tie it, and they'll ask you hundreds and thousands of questions on that. So to do that, to use that, and to prescribe that, again, philosophically, I don't think that's the way to go, because again, it's how the relative weight I place on math is very low. Something that we have to do, so I don't want to spend any more time than we do. Again, I don't want to, we could teach to the test, I don't want to teach to the test.
Because really, math isn't that, not playing it down, it's not really important. Math is just to kind of see where they're at.
Right,
You
it's a
don't-
dipstick.
If you go and prep them beforehand, then you really can't see where they're at. Like Keon, my middle one, last year had norovirus. Came back to school, when I mean he phoned it was bad. And when you look at it, that's why I'm asking about the growth percentage, because his growth was like 96%. Because he was that sick when he came back to school that he couldn't function during the test. So really, and I mean, it has no standing on how actually well he does in school. So it doesn't really mean anything, right? At the end of the day, unless your child's transferring to another school, and then maybe
That's what I
that.
mean,
then
like
you're
in
right.
general,
That
there's
is-
always gonna be testing.
But even then, if it transfers to another school, that's one piece of information that the school
Yes.
is looking at.
Yeah,
Then-
but can I answer the SAT comment? So the SAT, when they get in high school, they're prepping. They're doing multiple choice. When they're taking APs, like my daughter first AP test didn't do so well. I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be a disaster. They started working with them. The third time, A+. Like you get there. Like they're too young in elementary and middle.
So, given what she just said, do teachers use this information in any way?
Well, how I've seen teachers use it, and again, it's to reinforce the information. There was a graph earlier in terms of the spread, right? And we can see underneath in the 4 strands, you can actually see geometry, who scored better in geometry and who scored less. So that might be for grouping, right? I probably would have known that if I gave a pretest in math, I would have seen that anyways, but this gives it in a different way. Does that make sense? So you can see that. So that's where I found it somewhat useful. But everything besides that, it's really hard on an individual level. On the programmatic, if our reading scores consistently went down, right, we would know that, right? We would look at that, or we say, you know, and again, there's so many reasons, right? Because the population changes, the day, right? There's so many different variables about that. So we haven't figured out how we actively use it in a classroom to inform instruction. The on-demand, the pretest, that gives us more information than the math does.
I just want to know, how does it work, let's say if your child has a learning disability, like ADHD or dyslexia, is that, do you guys give extra time?
Yes.
So yes, there are accommodations based on the child's IEP. It could be a different setting, right? It could be even more time, right? There's different accommodations we can give, different breaks, a completely separate location. So we do that. So the way that we run it here is each block of testing is about an hour. So you notice we do it on 3 separate days. And in the afternoon, what we call there's extended time. Anyone who wants to continue, please go continue. Then we have the 3 makeup days. If you still need more time or you miss one of those days, you can take it on any of those days. But with that, we do individual accommodations based on the child's IEP. Yes. And that goes through, if it's in your child's IEP in middle school, that will hold as well.
And what if, let's say, like, my son, he had a progression, he's in 6th grade now, and it just went down.
Possible.
He didn't have norovirus.
Yes, it's possible. Again, we don't base anything.
And so I'm just
Yeah.
kind of it doesn't correlate with the math teacher.
Right.
So he's doing okay in his math, but
Yes.
and so I'm just trying to understand, like, was it a bad day? Or
That
was
would
it
be my
just
guess.
something?
If that's not the pattern of the trend, we know outliers. Again, 1 45-minute session, it's possible not to do well on it. And again, it doesn't affect the report card. We don't base anything on that report card.
But for things like that, you can ask your teacher to look in the system and see how quickly they were doing things.
Yeah, I did.
Is there a pattern of them
Yeah.
tapping?
He said he
you
did
know?
it very fast.
Yeah.
But,
And you can find exactly how fast.
yeah, but it's still, I would figure he'd do very fast for all of them, like, but it's just why this one?
Right.
It just doesn't.
There is actually like a 5th to 6th grade, like universally for math. We have someone in our school, like the data analyst, and so he helps with the data. There is actually some data to show a 5th to 6th grade kind of little slump, and then it comes back in the spring. But there's so many changes for those people who do have middle schoolers, right? From 5th to 6th, there is some changes. So that it is actually, like, it does happen. It's not abnormal.
Michelle, I think that's
You
yours.
kind of already.
Right.
I was just going to speak from a teaching and learning perspective of how we may use MAP, and it is going to be a middle school perspective because that's where I live. So elementary is a little bit different, and teachers see their elementary students a lot more frequently in middle school, right? The average teacher has 120 students. And so MAP is used occasionally. Jean mentioned in groupings, right? This group might need some reteaching about some geometry concepts, so I'm going to kind of form a small group here, and then I can put these groups. These students are kind of maybe achieving quite well, and I'm going to give them some more challenging problems so they can work together. So that's one example. For curriculum and instruction planning, also thinking about, and it's one data point, I'll give kind of an example. If a student is achieving really highly in the math, but maybe their course or their class work isn't necessarily showing strength, we might have to dig a little deeper. What else is going on with the student? Are they not feeling challenged enough? Are they needing some more challenges or some more feedback? So that's kind of the curriculum and instruction, and same at the other end. If the student's really struggling on math, but their course grade's looking great, and observations are looking good, it could be that rapid guessing. And when, so I proctor middle school math, and we do a kind of advisory lesson the day before, to think about good test taking strategies, have a good sleep, have a good breakfast, what to do about eliminating answers. And then while they're taking it, we can see if kids are like going too fast, and we'll say, hey, you know what, it looks like you might need a little break. Let's go for a little walk. So we coach them through the map as well. And then another way that we might use MAP is program evaluation. So this is more looking school-wide. I don't think this is going to come to a shock to anyone, but reading scores have been decreasing everywhere, right? The devices are a draw. And so I can give a concrete example. In the middle school, every grade 6, 7, and 8 in ELA has added an additional reading unit to support reading instruction. Someone mentioned about the different subgroups, informational reading, right? So in the reading map, there's literary, vocabulary, and informational text. Informational text is an area that sometimes students can struggle with. So in science and in social studies, we're thinking about how we can increase reading strategies to better comprehend informational text. So we do use it, but looking kind of like big picture, programmatic, and also using it to see, okay, what else might be going on with this particular student.
I think just a quick question. I think do you know how you kind of went through all of the charts and graphs that you're using to track for MAP? I think the reason maybe some parents kind of cling to MAP as like a gauge of how their kid's doing is because we maybe don't have as much insight into their day-to-day. So I know you guys had spoken about pre-assessments and how much more, like, I guess, emphasis you put on those. Do you guys have access to a similar type of report that could be shared with us that does maybe not about MAP, but it's more about their kid? Like, I think if I knew my kid was progressing and then they bombed in MAP, I wouldn't be so concerned. I'd be like, okay, they had an off day. But I think it's not clear to me that we're getting enough information from the day-to-day to be able to rely and be like, oh, they probably had an off day. So then you're like, what's happening? They're not doing well, or they're not where they need to be, and you kind of stress. But it's more, I think, because we don't have insight into the.
Do you have a middle schooler?
No, I have, my eldest is 4th grade.
I mean, for elementary parent, I just think from, I have a child in grade 1, and you'll see we didn't necessarily get a lot, but I mean, I've been appreciating those checks, like there's the math checks and there's the U-Fly, and him and I will have conversations about that, and kind of, and then the pre-unit information, and like going through those questions with him. I mean, I feel like I'm getting an understanding of where he's at. I'm just speaking that from a parent perspective, but maybe teacher probably. I got it earlier.
I can share a little bit more, and we've had discussions in terms of, because yes, we know that communication is important. So we've been working with our team leads, and it's actually filtering down to the homeroom teachers. Like for instance, a particular math unit, what is reasonable, what's the minimum number of items to send home? And we're working through that. So even in science, social studies, right, reading and writing, we're going to make sure that that's consistent throughout, that it doesn't depend on your child's classroom teacher or not, that everyone should be receiving at the very minimum, right, here, and here.
Yeah.
So we're working on that, so hopefully communication will be better. Because also report card should be no surprises.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, that should be happening, so we're working on that. Yeah.
Okay.
But hopefully anytime as well, please reach out to your child's teacher. I know we have the formal conferences, and yes, they're always there. We should be doing more, and you can also anytime, hey, we'll just do a check-in. So maybe both. Okay.
Sorry, just got a middle school question. So when you say reach out to your child's teacher, is it a specific teacher for a specific subject, or with the advisor?
It's probably the specific subject teacher will give you some more information about that specific.
But so where did we get the grade data? Because that was the question I asked my homeroom teacher, and she didn't have it. She only had the average norm, so it couldn't.
You mean the ASD, like grade 6?
Yeah, because that's for me like more relevant. Like, if he's behind his peers here or above his peers, it doesn't really matter. The norms, like, it's kind of a less relevant data point for me, and she didn't have it. So who
This
was
is middle school or elementary?
Elementary.
So I think, we need to be consistent. So that's something that we can look at, next, maybe setting up, because you can turn that on, right? So you can
That's
see.
in the MAP system
Yeah,
itself.
so we can
That's
look at
where
that.
we
There's
put it.
national, and you can also do, they call it district, which is ASD, and I think that's what you're asking for in terms of, right? I want to see my 3rd grader compared to ASD 3rd graders, right?
So there's also,
Yeah.
it's hard to know, like when you say 8% of US schools take the MAP, and here's the average, like what do those 8% of schools look like? Are they?
I think it's the whole range. I think they purposely pick so they don't pick all private schools in the U.S.
Yeah.
I think they have a representational sample. That's how they get their national.
It's like a good data point, but the more relevant one is like giving like the pure set.
How are they doing against other ASD
Yeah.
groups? Okay, that's something we talked about. No, we want to be consistent with the middle school and top level.
Yeah. Do you share it at the middle school level? So we have
No,
a-
it's the same. It's the same.
So
We want to
the
make sure that
report-
our reports are the same, so they're
The
not.
reports are generated by you?
No, the reports are generated by the system like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can add in the school one too?
We'll look to
or
do
no?
that. I think we can.
check what
We can check to see
ask.
what's available.
Yeah. there are different types of reports that the system can generate, so we can look at what information can be shared.
So, we'll stick around if you want to individual questions, but thank you so much for coming today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.